timely, insightful, discussion and analysis of economic trends and markets. From Southern California to Sacramento, featuring business and political leaders, unique field reports. From Orange County and the campus of Chapman University, this is the Chapman Business Report.
And welcome back to the Chapman Business Report. I'm Pete Weitzner. I head up the broadcast journalism program here on the campus of Chapman University, actually a couple of blocks east at the Dodge College of Film and Media Arts. It's every week that we look at business, the financial markets, and a special focus on the regional economies of Southern California and the state. That will be our focus on this show. Very pleased to be joined by Jim Righeimer, who's new councilman in the city of Costa Mesa, facing what the folks who run his city or run almost any city, county in this country around the world are facing these days, and that is systemic deficits and how to tackle the problem and maybe get to the systemic part of the problem, not just what we've seen in the last few years, brought about largely by a slowing economy. So we'll chat with Jim in just a bit and then duck in our feature story. It's going to take a look at the business of the Pac-12. That's right, not the Pac-10 anymore, the Pac-12. Why they did the big expansion as we record this and eventually run this show. We will have kicked off the college football season, the new Pac-12 season. But let's get to the matters of municipal finances. You know, Jim, it's tough all over.
Right.
It's tough for consumers. We're at 9-something% unemployment. It's tough in this country, at the state, at the federal level. It's tough in Europe. China's wrestling with inflation, but maybe tougher nowhere more than the folks running a city, even a city like yours that has wonderful South Coast Plaza
Right.
and all that. How did it get this way?
Well, it's interesting. There's not one separate thing, but basically how municipal government's set up, and I think county governments are set up, is there's not a lot of accountability. There just isn't. You know, the one thing about the private sector is there's a bottom line and someone cares about that bottom line. You can't transfer that completely over to government.
There is accountability in that you come before the voters.
Well, you come before the voters in accountability, but as long as there's enough cash to pay everything and nobody screams, then everything's okay. What we found in government in the last 20 years, seriously, is that the capital improvements simply aren't happening. They're not being done in any of the cities out there. Our city, which
roads.
Yeah, our city, you look at it, you say South Coast Plaza, number one tax generating plaza on the planet, and we couldn't slurry seal our streets. And what you find out is as you get into government, and it's not just Costa Mesa, it's many cities around, you look at the inefficiencies of how they operate. I mean, when you start looking at staff and you say, how many days a week do you work? And you find out, well, we don't work 5 days a week, we work 4 days a week, but we work an extra hour, we have every other Friday off, we have 12 holidays, we have a dozen sick days we can take. If we don't take them, we get paid for them. I mean, all sorts of things that the private sector would never allow, government does.
Private sector maybe used to, and I started with a big company, Johnson & Johnson, but it's anachronistic now in the private sector.
Yeah, it's simply not there. You have to have results at the end, and the accountability results metrics for government just isn't there yet.
Quick background for you, and then how you got personally into this mess, and unless you've been living in Iraq, if you follow Orange County news, Orange County politics, Costa Mesa has been, what does one website call it, the bubbling cauldron. But your background, and why would you take, you're your first year councilman, you're pro-tem, why would you take this on now, but your background?
Well, I mean, part of it, I've been in the real estate business my whole life, so when you're 19, 20 years of age and you got to go to a planning commission in that business, you start to realize who's in your government. Other industries don't have that. My industry happens to have it.
Made.
So you see how the sausage is made. You start to realize things don't look exactly right, but everything is doing okay. The longer you get into it, the more you see how money's spent or money's wasted or inefficiencies. You have a hard time trying to figure out what to do. And then, I got married maybe a little late in life, and I've got 3 young daughters. And I love our community, Costa Mesa, where I live, and I want them to live in a good community. And I started to look at how the infrastructure wasn't being taken care of, and finally just kind of dawned on me that I need to get involved here. And I got myself appointed onto the Planning Commission and became the chairman of the Planning Commission, and then from there ran for the City Council.
Fair to say that your take would be the system isn't corrupt, the system is broke. With not getting into individual, the system is broke. And
right. I mean, first of all, understand, we've got extremely good employees in our city, and all these cities do. I mean, you don't just get a job at a city for being nobody. You've got to be somebody. You've got to work hard and do things. But the system that's in place doesn't have the proper measurements needed in there. I mean, our city, a simple question asked when I first came on, Councilman Steve Mensinger asked for it, do we have an organization chart? There was no organization chart, period. We had no idea who employed who was under who reported to who. Now, I'm sure people in the city knew, but the outside people didn't know. The other thing that was major when I ran was we pushed to get the compensation of every single employee by name, by every line of compensation they have. And what the unions have done over all the years is they talk about base pay and all these different kinds of pay, and the reality of it is we have hundreds of employees making over $100,000 and some making over $200,000.
And the difference between, some would say, and I'm sure the union's rejoinder has been, well, they don't have to do that in the private sector. Why should the difference being this is taxpayer money?
It's taxpayer money. We're a public agency. I understand why, as a person, you may not want it to be out there, but I'm running for city council. There's Form 400s. Every client that I have, every bit of money I made, I have to put on a website because I'm in the public realm, and so is the public employees.
So the first thing, or one of the first things that you and your colleagues did or tried to do, which I think made the biggest headline, is essentially give layoff notices to about half the employees?
Well, let's back up a little bit. 1 week before the election in November, the labor unions got the previous council to extend all their contracts out a total of 4 years, and basically said to the new council coming in, you can't do anything, not to the next election, not even the following election, because we've got our contracts extended.
What percentage of your employees? 600 roughly total?
There was 600 back a few years. We're at 472 employees now.
And what percentage are union employees?
They're all union employees.
All union?
All union employees.
You work for the city of Costa Mesa, and is it one union?
No, there's three. There's the police. There's more than three technically.
Police, fire,
police,
and
fire,
then
and municipal,
County.
And then the management teams have their own unions too, which is part of the problem in there. And one of the things that you see is that the people that are negotiating these contracts get everything they negotiate. So when you talk about transparency, you're talking about...
Why is that?
It just is. It's the way it's always been done. Nobody seems to think there's any big deal. But part of the problem with like these pension plans is the higher echelon in the city gets them. So if you're a city CEO or city manager, you're going to get 75% of your pay for the rest of your life once you're 55 years of age. That's unsustainable. There's no way that math works, and I'm talking simple math that doesn't work.
How do you, and we'll get to the details of what's transpired in Costa Mesa, a lot in just your 7 months as a first-year councilman, but how do you get at the system? So, I mean, getting away from, people can argue for a long time what the proper rate of pay is for a police captain and for a 9/11 operator. Much has been made that these are the 9/11 operators are six-figure jobs in Costa Mesa. But the system where, as you say, they just get what they want, how do you get at that?
Well, the problem with it is understand that unlike the private sector, the public employees pick their boss. Okay, they pick who's on the city council. So you may either...
the citizens do, no?
Well, let's back up a little bit. Yeah, the citizens do when they vote for it, but they vote based on information they get, mailers they get. So the biggest problem that we've had here in Orange County...
Your position would be there's undue influence because of political contributions.
A real simple fact. Our labor unions spend more on politics every year than all 117,000 residents in the city combined. I mean, and why? Because it matters to them. They want to pick who's on their quote-unquote board of directors.
But in this age of the internet, there's a lot of information out there, and not all of it taxed to the union.
Right, and if I talk to other city councils, my peers in other city councils, people just want to get elected. So the biggest thing is not that you do what the union wants, you just become silent.
Human nature, you're not going to
You just don't fight it, you don't want to argue about it. Who, after 9/11, wants to argue with police and fire? We love our police. We love our firemen.
Which is how the county, some would say, got in trouble when they extended the the rate of
pay to retiring employees at 90% of pay at 50 years of age.
So you need them. Your perspective, you need them to be a partner with you on this, and that's of course any city. Your biggest expense is salaries, and your biggest expense there is police and fire.
Well, I'll tell you, last year our budget, before we got in, the budget, the big four of money that comes in, your sales tax, your property tax, your hotel tax, and your business license fee, were $67 million. $67 million. Our police and fire cost $66 million. I mean, the number's kind of crazy, and that has to shift of how we pay for those services.
Okay, and we want to talk about, there's, again, going forward, we're going to get to the specifics of what's happening in Costa Mesa, but going forward, ideas about sharing services. I think you're already looking into that. Some have suggested maybe a super city.
I don't know about a super city. I think you want to date before you get married. So what our city is looking at is cities around us to say, do you need 4 SWAT teams between Huntington Beach, Newport Beach, Costa Mesa and Fountain Valley. Probably one SWAT team scene. They don't even get called out every year. Do you need to have animal control for every city? How about dispatch, where people do the 911 calls? Does every single city have to have a 911 system out there? There is obviously a connection with us in Newport. We have the exact same school district, so there's already a lot of connections. Our kids' sports teams and leagues and all that kind of stuff are already tied together. And from a history, Newport and Costa Mesa have both been around, even though we weren't a municipality, we're around 100 years together.
Let's jump back to the layoffs, and I think it goes hand in hand, the idea of privatizing, because some of those jobs you'd have to make up, right, by outsourcing.
Correct.
Where are you at? You instituted those notices almost 6 months ago, and they would have taken effect pretty soon, but they're not going to.
Yeah, so two things happened in there. One, they locked in the contracts. The only thing this council could do was outsource or lay off. You can't lay off everybody, you need work done. So we looked in the city at items that were already being outsourced throughout the county and throughout the state. Fleet maintenance. We have a full garage, we have mechanics, we have all the people to take care of our vehicles and our cars. Well, Fords and Chevys are kind of the same everywhere. You have to have a fleet maintenance group to go ahead and do something like that. Most all cities don't have something like that. So we looked at those items that we could outsource. Now, a judge has come in and said, until our case is over, because the union took us to court, until it's over, we can only outsource to other agencies. So we're looking right now with Newport Beach to take over our jail system, or to merge the two jail systems. We're right next door to each other. Is there really a need for two 24-hour, 365 a day a year jails next door to each other? Obviously
do you
not.
get pushback even on that?
Oh, absolutely get pushback on that.
Because everything is jobs.
Well, it's not just jobs. The job is the one part. It's how much the rate of pay is the issue. So that we already got our bids back on. We will save $50,000 a month, $600,000 a year by merging the two jails, and so will Newport Beach. What we had when we first looked at this...
Again, the popular rejoinder is if it's run by a... Now here are we talking about a for-profit outsource?
Well, Newport Beach would not be a for-profit group. Just the economies of scale will go ahead and bring those kind of cost savings in there. But there are other firms that do your jail service, that do Irvine's jail, that do Beverly Hills jail, that do a lot of other jails are run by outside companies because you don't need sworn individuals to run a jail.
Take a quick break, come back more with Jim Righeimer, get a sense of how he feels maybe other cities in Orange County or elsewhere might be looking at what he and his colleagues are doing in Costa Mesa. Stay with us on the Chapman Business Report.
Councilman Jim Righeimer.
So I want to ask Jim first, is there really a financial crisis? How much trouble are we really in? Or do you view this more as an opportunity?
You have a $93 million budget and you spend $15 to $20 million just for your pension, you're in trouble.
And welcome back to the Chapman Business Report. Pete Weitzner joined by Councilman from Costa Mesa, Jim Righeimer, talking about the business of running a local city, in his case, Costa Mesa. You just passed a budget, you said first balanced budget?
First balanced budget where we didn't use any reserves in 10 years.
There's no law that says that municipalities have to pass a balanced budget.
No, and understand what municipalities call a balanced budget is they'll use reserves and say it's balanced because it used reserves. We didn't use any reserves.
Matched expenses to revenue.
Not only that, we put $1 million in a line item that we had for if things go wrong, which we never had before.
Even though you haven't really been able to enact much of the savings that you want to, the layoffs, the outsourcing.
Well, we started off immediately with the helicopter program. I mean, we have 3 helicopters that sit in a hangar next to 3 helicopters the county has that fly, 35 hours a week, yet we have 7 people that are licensed pilots in the program. We have 280 hours of pilots to fly 35 hours a week. It's crazy. And then what you're asking earlier is how do you do it? Money spent on all sorts of places. You got to hit them one at a time and work your way through.
As you knew going in, you were not going to be a popular man.
Right.
First, just on a personal level, any regrets? I mean, you have literally been in the middle of the maelstrom, and you get angry calls, worse than that, right?
Yeah, we've had a lot of things happen in the city, but the reality of it is, a lot of people talk about getting into public office, and they'll say, "Listen, you got to watch what you say and how you say things, because you can't change anything until you're in office." And my kind of come from is if you don't have anything to say, what you have to do, why you're going into office. Clearly, my only comment I made during the campaign was the pensions and pay is unsustainable. You cannot retire people at 50 years of age that now we know live till 80. and pay them 90% of their pay with the 2% increase every single year. It's not that we don't love our police and our fire. I mean, I've got a police officer in my neighborhood. His
But
pension's
that, even if you did
Yeah.
have cooperation, you can't touch that for 4 years.
Well, no, we can't. We can't touch that for 4 years, correct?
One big thing that you like to point out is that where we're falling short, and you've mentioned a couple of times, you look at the roads, is that we have to cut back on capital projects, and that that of course affects the marketing of a city, right?
Right, absolutely. I mean, the life's blood of a city is families. And if you don't take care of your parks and your roads, you're not going to attract people. So when you're in areas like here in Orange or in Anaheim or in Costa Mesa where the cities are a little bit older, you've got to put money into capital improvements. Our city has a list of $204 million in capital improvements that aren't being taken care of. And when we first sat down with staff to go over, let's say, the alleys, the alley budget to get our alleys back in shape, we have 90 alleys that need to be redone, was a budget that would take 40 years to finish the alleys. 40 years. That makes no sense. You need to allocate whatever capital's needed and do it that way. So the comment that I get from people is, government is not a business. Well, it has budgets, it has payroll, it has people, it has schedules. Yes, it's a nonprofit. We're supposed to deliver services, but it needs to be run like a business so you can make sure you have capital to pay for projects.
Would the folks who criticize what you're trying to do, would part of what they would come back to you and say, well, we need, and the reason this is all, of course, come to the fore is that revenues are down. Property taxes, to the extent, what share is that for cities?
Actually, it's a good chunk, but it really hasn't dropped because
federal aid is down.
Well, there's very little federal aid that comes to our city.
So
sales tax was the big one that hit our city. But if you looked at our costs and our expenses, we couldn't have kept up anyway. The curve was already pulling away. We went through.
If South Coast Plaza were packed day and night.
If it was packed day and night, it still wouldn't solve the problem because the curve, the expenses was pulling away from how much we brought in. And what we were doing to solve that was by getting rid of capital projects to the point where 80+% of our budget was going to salaries and benefits.
Do your critics suggest that you should raise taxes?
Well, they always say we should raise taxes.
What kind of tax would that be?
Utility tax is one that I've heard about, a few $100s a year.
You have one in Costa Mesa?
No, we do not have a utility tax.
And some cities do, and
some cities
it's quite high.
Some cities it's 5, 7, maybe 10% of the utility, they charge an additional tax.
Looking at some out-of-the-box thinking, when you talk about capital projects, some folks might say, well, road, we can live with the alleys, but you're talking about fighting things like homelessness through some kind of out-of-the-box capital projects.
Well, absolutely. I mean, we have a homeless issue in Costa Mesa. I would argue that a lot of the county sends their homeless issue here, but the fact of the matter is we have it. You cannot arrest your way out of the homeless problem, so you have to have some carrots and some sticks. You cannot enforce your no camping bans in the parks unless you have a place for people to go. So we're going to have to look at spending capital dollars on some kind of housing or something for homeless so that we can enforce the no camping bans in the parks and clean these parks
In this
up.
new budget, you're going to be able to do any of that?
This budget this year we won't. We put some dollars towards the planning of it, but we're talking, millions of dollars will be needed to do it, but we're already talking to nonprofit organizations to help us with that.
Amid the critics, do you also get some, perhaps even some, you probably wouldn't want to divulge names, some from the union who let you know in quiet ways that they appreciate what you're doing or understand it?
What's really interesting is most of the employees, I get police officers that come up to me and they say, I just want to be a cop. I love my job, this is great, and I really appreciate it. And I think the people in Costa Mesa or most cities just want to hear from their employees. They appreciate their job and it's good, and then we can all work together to figure this thing out. But we can't continue to go down this road of unsustainable pensions or pay that doesn't work. People want to keep their jobs and they want to do it. The problem you have with labor unions is it's all based on seniority. So when you come to that vote of saying, do you want to cut pay 20% or get rid of 20% of the people? 80%, it's human nature, will vote to get rid of the 20%. And that's just the way it is. And that's the hardest part that we have to work with is even if we come up with an idea, they can't get it voted past their membership because enough have seniority that don't want to change.
You look at people at the national level like Scott Walker in Wisconsin, Chris Christie in New Jersey. Are these kind of your models?
You know what? That's a much bigger model than I'm looking at. We're in a small city of 117,000 people. I've got my wife and my kids, and I just want the infrastructure to be in place. I want to make sure we have good programs for the kids. I want to make sure we're always attracting families to the community. I think part of the problem that we're having in Costa Mesa is that the AFL-CIO National, they're calling us, Costa Mesa is Wisconsin and California, and they're putting all this money in. If you haven't seen the ads on our cable TV, it's every night you see it on there. We just want to run our city. The community wants us to run our city. Nowhere do I go, whether it's at the fairgrounds or at Home Depot, people just come up to me, shake my hand, and they say, don't stop, just keep on going. There's a frustration in this country with the federal government and the state government, and here they feel they can touch their local electeds and just say, don't stop. We know you're doing the right thing, don't stop.
Well, and whether people agree with you or not, I think one thing we learned of financial market turmoil of mid-August is that on either side, they don't want no solution, which is what we got initially. So people may not agree with you, Jim Righeimer, but you are saying we can't sustain this, so let's try this. And if they don't like your method, they'll try it another way.
Correct.
I appreciate you coming by. You're off on a city business to the Far East.
Correct.
So I wish you good luck on your trip, and it's always a joy having conversation with you.
Good to see you again, Pete.
Jim
Thanks.
Righeimer, City Councilman Pro-Tem in the city of Costa Mesa. Straight ahead, a look at the new Pac-12, the business of Pac-12 football. Stay with us on the Chapman Business Report.
It's great, and I would think we're probably maybe the university that needed the money the least necessarily as far as the TV contract. So you'd think maybe we'd say something different, but I think it's great.
Welcome back to the Chapman Business Report. It's time for our feature stories. It will surprise no one to hear that college football is a business. So as, depending on when you're watching this, the Pac-12 football season is getting ready to, or is underway. Here's a look at the new bottom line for the newly expanded Pac-12. This was no usual media day for Pac-10 football. First, it's now Pac-12. After decades of chatter, expansion is reality. Welcome Eastern newcomers, Colorado and Utah.
It was very exciting for the university, for the community, and big challenges lie ahead.
The Pac-12 has two divisions, keeping the biggest and border rivals together. The Washingtons, Oregons, and NoCal unis in the north, the SoCals, Arizonas, and the Pac-12 newbies in the south. The division winners play off for an automatic BCS berth on the regular season champs' home turf. All that and a $2.5 billion 10-year TV deal with Fox and ESPN.
And it really allowed us to go to two divisions, have a football championship game, and with all that and all that ensued from that, to strike this media agreement. All of it was part of the plan, but the buzz this year and the turnout is, I think, unprecedented.
It's great, and I would think we're probably maybe the university that needed the money the least necessarily as far as the TV contract. So you'd think maybe we'd say something different, but I think it's great.
It's good. It's good from a geographical standpoint with Salt Lake City and Denver. I think it's good from a competitive standpoint. Utah and Colorado are rich in history and tradition in football. And then the Pac-12 championship game, putting it on a campus of the team with the best record and the fanfare, I think it'll be great exposure for our conference.
The sun is clearly visible on this first Pac-12 Media Day, but so are the clouds that hover over two of the top programs. There are the sanctions against USC and a pending investigation against Oregon. There's plenty of things to look forward to, beginning with Heisman runner-up, Stanford quarterback Andrew Luck.
Play-action pass here. Luck is another Kobe Fleener touchdown.
Andrew, does a day like today kind of reinforce in your mind you made the right decision playing college again?
I don't particularly enjoy days like today, so no.
But it's a college atmosphere.
I guess so.
Last year, USC was in the crosshairs. Now it's back-to-back champ and national number 2, Oregon. Accusations of illegally using street agent Willie Lyles to lure recruits to Oregon. The NCAA probe is pending, and Coach Chip Kelly was ducking on this day.
I got to defer to, and I would love to talk about it. And when we have a chance after the report comes out, then I'll be able to clear up any questions that anybody has about the whole situation.
Well, we're excited to be here.
What a difference a year makes. USC lost its appeal. It's on probation and can't play in that first Pac-12 championship. But as with many bad things, the best part is it's over.
We're glad it's over.
we're disappointed in the decision, but it is what it is, and we worry about what we can control. We're moving forward.
Among the starters coming back in 2011, Mater Dei grad Matt Barkley.
We have all this skill and we have all these players, but I think we're finally be able to turn that into production.
The pressure's on Barkley and also on fourth-year UCLA head coach and alum Rick Neuheisel.
Excited to be here. As a coach on the proverbial hot seat, I guess you're excited to be invited to any of these things.
After 3 disappointing and worse still dull years in Westwood, Neuheisel insists the Bruins' time is now.
For the first time in my time at UCLA, we're too deep on defense, with the possible exception at corner. So where everybody can go in there and play, and you don't feel like you're letting losing a lot when someone else goes in the game. So for those reasons, hope springs eternal.
Neuheisel says the Bruins' fortunes haven't been boosted by the problems across town, but rather by players like 1,000-yard running back Jonathan Franklin.
I could care less what's going on across town or what's going on. It really doesn't matter.
A sentiment shared on this day by players and coaches of all 12 teams. After all, it's summer and everyone's tied. But in the new Pac-12, uneasy lies the crown, and the teams that dominate one day can be on the run the next. Our thanks to all the coaches and players for their terrific accessibility on that day. Of course, when everyone's 0-0 and it's August, everyone's in a great mood, but should be an interesting season. Special thanks to Councilman from Costa Mesa, Jim Righeimer, for his insights on the battles on trying to balance the books these days at a local city. And as always, to Jeff Cole, class of 2000 here at Chapman University, for his crew, Jeff Cole Productions. They do the entire Chapman Business Report. Thank you very much for watching. Back again next week, another look at business, financial markets, with a special focus on the regional economies of Southern California. I'm Pete Weitzner.
Funding for this program was provided by Chapman University.